Even as his soldiers die in droves as they smash their faces against Ukraine's drone wall, the Kremlin thinks that everything will be okay. Russia is a big country. There will always be more meat to feed into the grinder. Only that isn't looking like the case anymore. Russia is emptying out as people have started to refuse the call to fight in Putin's war. Those people know that something sinister is afoot, and they're getting out before they're pushed to the front lines. 500,000 Russians could be called up to fight. Nobody in Russia wants this. Now we're seeing people running for their lives, forcing the Kremlin to face up to the fact that the wellspring of cannon fodder it's forcing into Ukraine is running dry. How do we know? It all lies in the internet searches and what Russians are actually doing as we speak. In an August 20th report, United 24 Media revealed that July saw online inquiries from Russian citizens relating to emigration reach their highest levels since early 2023. That's according to data from Yandex, which is Russia's equivalent to the Google search engine. That data shows that the term relocation was searched 809,900 times in July alone, which is over 100,000 more times than in June, and represents a record number for emigration-related searches since Russia carried out its partial mobilization in September 2022. Keep mobilization in mind, it plays a huge role in all of this. Other search queries indicate that millions of Russians aren't just contemplating getting out of their country, but are actively looking into ways to do it. Yandex reports that there were 1.3 million queries for the word leave in July. Russians are also looking for places they can run to without being forced to apply for a visa, and thus put themselves in the firing line of recruiters who will be watching every move that they're making. Searches for visa-free rose to 171,600 in July, which is 27% more than the previous month. The phrase "leave without visa" also set a record not seen since January 2023, with 2,253 queries. Oh, and Russians also seem to experience a strange spike of Georgia-related interest. The nation, which has had its own problems with Putin's aggression, was searched 22,000 times in July, which is more than double the search rate for travel to Georgia seen at the beginning of 2026. What all of this tells us is that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Russian people who are actively looking for ways to get out of Dodge as fast as they can. And it's not just Yandex that's reporting this. According to Novaya Gazeta, daily requests made to the Russian relocation support project, Relocats, have also spiked. Since April, daily inquiries to that service have risen from 70 to 120. According to Relocats' editor-in-chief Alexandra Nazarova, this spike coincided with the Kremlin enforcing internet restrictions on its people, combined with a growing sense that life has become less predictable for the average Russian. Now the inquiries are growing more urgent. People are practically begging Relocats to help them choose a country and get the appropriate documents so they can leave Russia before the fall. So a lot of questions are being asked, but there's more to it than that. As the internet searchers make their plans, other Russians are actively fleeing from Russia. That's according to an August 19th Ukraine Today report, which says that a record-breaking 20,000 Russian people are crossing the border from their country into Georgia every single day. Specifically, the number was over 19,000 on August 15th to 16th, before rising to more than 20,000 on August 18th. Those 3 days alone represent 60,000 people who have left Russia, and there is plenty more where that's coming from. Even Russia's migration affairs have been forced to take notice, stating that the numbers significantly exceed those for the same periods in previous years. The Moscow Times adds more in its own report. It says that there are now massive traffic jams that have formed on the Russian side of the border. Russians are so desperate to get out that they're willing to wait in these queues, which are crawling along at a pace of just 50 meters per hour. It could be literally days before those at the back of this queue actually get into Georgia. And what's more, we're seeing something similar in Armenia. There are no reports of queues there yet, however, demand for apartments in the country's capital city of Yerevan has risen to the point where prices have increased by 30%, all driven by Russian demand. The big question has to be asked. Why is this happening? It's because the Russian people know that something sinister is in the air. We'll give you a little clue as to what that is. There's something we haven't revealed about the Yandex data we shared. A certain search term that Russians used in July more than any of the others that we've already mentioned. That term was mobilization, and millions of Russians searched for it in July. According to the Moscow Times, there was a 166% spike in searches for this single word, up from 1.3 million in June to 3.4 million in July. Russians haven't looked up mobilization this much since January 2023, the outlet reports, and we're starting to see a certain chain of events taking place. Russian people are hearing about mobilization, likely through social media channels or news sources that aren't state-owned and operate. They conduct searches themselves, and they don't like what they see. In fact, they hate it, so much so that many of those who look up mobilization on Yandex end up searching for ways to leave Russia. Others, in the tens of thousands, are already getting out while they still can. The panic exists for a good reason, and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelenskyy has been pointing to that reason since May. On May 8th, DW carried words spoken by Ukraine's president. He is concealing his intention behind different words and signals, but he is making preparations. It's important that we, together with our partners, exert sufficient pressure on Russia so that the idea of ending this aggression, the idea of peace rather than further Russian mobilization, prevails, Zelenskyy declared. The intention in this quote is to mobilize hundreds of thousands of Russian reservists for the war in Ukraine. Zelenskyy repeated the claim in August, adding an extra wrinkle. The only reason that mobilization hasn't happened yet, he says, is that Putin is waiting until the conclusion of State Duma elections, scheduled for September, before he takes his next steps. They are preparing it for the fall, right after the imitation of parliamentary elections. Putin's plan is not particularly complicated. He wants to create the impression that Russians supposedly support the war. All the parties that are currently allowed to participate are, one way or another, against peace, Zelenskyy said. Even for Russia's political elite, this is a strategy so transparent that it may as well be made out of glass, and it's clear that there are plenty of Russians who can see right through it. We don't just have to take Zelenskyy's word for what Putin has planned either. Moves are being made behind the scenes that tell us that mobilization is coming soon to a Russia near you. In its July 22nd Russian campaign assessment, the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, revealed that Russia has already taken several legal steps to prepare for a future mobilization. Among them was the passing of a bill by the State Duma on July 22nd that expands the number of criminal Russians who can sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense to include those convicted of drug smuggling and organized criminal activity. That move is a stealth mobilization. A day before, Russia's internal security force, Rosgvardia, published a proposed amendment to its own regulations that allows it to protect against unspecified dangers relating to civil unrest and mobilization in wartime. Before all of this, the ISW says, November 2025 also saw Putin sign a bill that allows him to deploy reservists to combat areas without declaring mobilization. It is mobilization, just carried out in the sort of sneaky and slimy way that we'd expect from the Kremlin. Other hints about what the Kremlin has planned come from August. On August 20th, the BBC monitoring service reported that Russian companies are actively hiring staff to handle military registration. That's a strange move right now, as volunteer registration is down, but it's happening. Over 2,600 job vacancies have been posted for this type of role over the past few weeks, the BBC says. That compares with just 500 such roles in late 2022. Guidelines have also been reissued by several financial industry journals in Russia, all telling employers what they have to do if mobilization is declared. There's some smoke, and the fire likely won't be far away. Adding to all of this, the partisan group Artesh reports that authorities are making visits to military training grounds in several Russian regions. Those visits include checks to see if the training grounds are suitable to accommodate large groups of people, almost as though Russian authorities are expecting a large wave of recruits to come filtering through any day now. And another sneaky bill has just been submitted to the State Duma. Bill number 1322098 introduces the suspension of operations for up to 90 days and fines up to about $12,100 for companies that fail to comply with decisions of operational headquarters, RBC Ukraine reports. In other words, if a company tries to say no when the Russian military comes calling, it will be punished. This bill clears the way for forced seizure of assets, equipment, and even people for use by the Russian army. We see subtle and not so subtle signs all coming together to tell us what hundreds of thousands of Russians already know. Mobilization is coming. If you're Russian and of fighting age, it's time to get out. For the Kremlin, this is a case of desperate times calling for desperate measures. Before we explain how Russia got here, this is a quick reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If you're getting value from the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. A couple of minutes ago, we told you that there is no reason why Russia would be hiring people to handle military registrations en masse. Volunteer recruitment has fallen considerably in Russia, and that fact alone shows us how Russia has gotten to the point where it needs mobilization. DW shares some regional figures from April and May. It says that 1,708 people volunteered to go to the front from Moscow in April, followed by 1,378 in May. This amounts to about 1,000 fewer people than those who volunteered during the same period in 2025. That is a microcosm of something that's happening all over Russia. People are simply not signing up to fight Putin's war in the numbers that Russia needs right now. Across Russia, the first quarter of 2026 saw about 20% fewer people sign up for military service in Russia than during the same period in 2025. That's according to Janis Kluger of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, who says the numbers are as low as 800 volunteers signing up per day. That seems like a lot until you realize that Russia is losing well over 1,000 soldiers daily in Ukraine. On August 22nd alone, Russia lost 1,310 soldiers. That isn't an outlier. It's a standard day for Russian soldiers on the front, who are being torn apart by Ukraine's defenses as they are ordered to conduct suicidal assaults or try to sneak through the kill zones to reach Ukrainian positions. It's a simple case of inputs and outputs no longer align. Russia isn't able to hire enough volunteer soldiers to deal with the churn that results from the Kremlin's terrible tactics. As a result of all of this, Russia has been left in what The Guardian calls a recruitment scramble. We call it desperation. The outlet also points to Kluger's figures, noting a top end of 1,000 volunteers per day. It also says that Russian recruiting has transformed from being a case of waving huge sums of money in people's faces to becoming what Alexei Tabalov, who is a human rights activist who helps Russian conscripts, dubs a hunt for people. According to Tabalov, under various pretexts, through deception, blackmail, violence, and threats, they are forcing them to sign contracts. That claim is backed by a report in the Wall Street Journal which says that recruiters are now working with Russian police to detain fighting-age men, often close to their places of work. Those men are told that they're being detained so their documents can be checked. They end up in military enlistment offices where they're beaten into submission, sign contracts, and then get sent to the front. That's how far Russian military recruiting has fallen. What could once be achieved with money now has to be done using fists, feet, and the butts of rifles. The recruiters can't keep up with the casualties, and that's why the Kremlin is putting so many new legal frameworks in place that support mobilization. It's coming, no matter what the Kremlin says. Russian people believe that Putin is soon going to force them into war. And beyond the internet searches and the exodus of tens of thousands of Russians to Georgia, we can also see how Russians feel about living in their country from survey results. On August 19th, United 24 Media reported on a poll conducted by VTS-IOM. This isn't any old polling company. VTS-IOM is state-run, Kremlin-backed, and will do everything that it can to massage figures to ensure they look as good for Putin as they possibly can. And not even that pollster can hide the mood in Russia. A survey that it conducted in July found that 66% of Russians believe that difficult times lie ahead for their nation. That represents a 16% upswing since the beginning of 2026, and it all translates into something very simple. Russians know that mobilization is coming. They're now trying to get out. They're now trying to get out while they still can. Here's what all of this boils down to. Despite its own claims, Russia is putting all of the pieces in place for a mobilization that would spread across the entire country. As many as 500,000 people could be caught up in the Kremlin's net, sent to training grounds that are being inspected as we speak, and then shipped off to Ukraine. There are already rumblings that Russia is preparing a renewed offensive that will kick off in February 2027, coming on the back of the failed 2026 campaign that has seen it make almost no real progress, while losing about 225,500 troops in the first 7 months of the year alone. This mobilization will be Putin's gamble, his last throw of the dice to get what he wants out of Ukraine so he can claim some sort of victory in a war that was never supposed to be a war. What Putin hopes is that he doesn't get snake eyes when he tosses the dice. But what he has planned could end up tearing through the entire fabric of Russian society. Yes, mobilization would help Russia solve the lopsided war calculus problem that it has right now. According to the New Voice of Ukraine, an anonymous Russian general has claimed that Russia now needs to find a way to replace up to 60,000 casualties per month if it's to capture the Donbas region. That would have to be done through mobilization, as volunteer recruitment simply isn't cutting it. Russian economist Vladislav Inozemtsev has a different view. He puts the possibility of mobilization at about 30%, and he says that it would happen not due to Russian manpower issues, but because Putin has lost the plot in Ukraine. Russia's leader is no longer making rational decisions, The Economist argues. He's now the guy at the craps table who's been on a bad streak for so long that he doesn't even know what a win feels like anymore. But he keeps on demanding those dice. Putin would do well to pull himself out of his gambler's haze and remember what happened in the past. We touched on the September 2022 partial mobilization earlier. Protests broke out all over Russia following that announcement, leading to at least 1,300 arrests. The Kremlin cracked down hard, warning people that they could face up to 15 years in prison for taking part, but thousands did it anyway, chanting slogans such as "No to war" and "Life to our children." And that was for a partial mobilization of 300,000 people. Looks like the Kremlin wants to add another 200,000 to that number the second time around, and just the rumors alone are sparking a mass exodus. Again, Russia saw that in 2022. Only now Russians are searching for ways to get out or actively running to places like Georgia and Armenia before the hammer drops. The Kremlin knows all of this. That's why it's waiting and lying about all of the preparations being made. If a mobilization happens, the New Voice of Ukraine reports, then it won't be until the State Duma elections conclude on September 20th. That's what Zelenskyy referred to when he said that he wanted to create an impression of a pro-war country. Fill the elections only with parties that run on a pro-war platform, and you create that impression by default. Once Putin has the people he wants in Russia's parliament, that's when he will roll the dice on mobilization. Until then, the lies are being delivered to the Russian people. On August 21st, Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, claimed, "We do not need mass mobilization at the moment. It's not planned or expected as far as I know." The numbers say otherwise, not just in recruiting, but in the thousands upon thousands of Russians who are expressing their refusal to fight by getting out of the country while they're still able. They know that something sinister is coming. They don't want to wait around for the recruiters to come knocking on their doors at home or at work to force them into a fight they never wanted, so they run. As far away from Putin's grip as they can get, so they can watch from afar as their leader sends Russia plunging from one catastrophe to the next. The dice are already in Putin's hand. The next, and possibly final, roll is coming. And for Russia, a new round of mobilization could spell the end of the Kremlin, as it makes the move it's always promised it would never make. But it's a move that has to be made. Why? Putin has set world records for senseless military losses as Russia edges closer to a landmark 1.5 million casualties in Ukraine. Find out what that means for the future of the war and Russia itself by watching our video. Before you watch, this channel is built by real people who care about getting the story right. Subscribe, join the conversation below, and consider becoming a member to support human-made military reporting and unlock exclusive content. And thank you, as always, for watching.